Today we have Greg Airel. Greg has been a mentor, a friend, a guide in the logistics and supply chain industry for me personally and many for a long time. So I'm super excited to have him at the show today. Greg, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shiv. It's always good to see you and connect and learn about all the exciting things you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. Likewise. I've had an opportunity to talk to you at different instances in my life when I was starting a 3PL, when I was in the middle of it, when I was moving on to Commerce Center, the liquidation business that I'm doing. So yeah, super thankful to you to take this time to chat today. I'm ready to get into it and share with the audience of of an adventurous career that you've had across different areas.
Oh yeah, lots of adventures, personal adventures, business adventures. It's all an adventure, and at the end of the day, it's fun stuff.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I want to start from the very top, Greg. So, you started in the software development industry. You also founded a company over there in that line of work. So not just working in software, but you actually built a startup in the software industry. So, um, talk about a little bit about that time. Like, how does that shape what you do today?
Yeah. My software engineering degree is probably one of the key things that I rely on in building businesses because at the end of the day, computer science and software engineering is around problem solving. And having gone through all the training and schooling, I really became a problem solver. And that is translated throughout any business I've created, whether it's e-commerce, technical, or logistics. It's all about problem solving at the end of the day, problem solving for your customers and clients. And, I first just became super interested in computers, specifically Android applications. And that was one of the first things I built and released, was just a simple little bookmark app. There was no widget on the home screen for Android devices, and I couldn't believe it. So, a weekend and a case of beer later, I developed the app and released it to the market. And that's when I guess I got my first tape of entrepreneurialism. And from there, it's just sort of scaled, and that hunger to create and problem solve just has translated across every different business venture I've been a part of.
That's super interesting. I mean, I can completely relate the feeling of kind of creating something and putting it out there. Even at the same, I mean, even if we don't know if there's going to be any traction to it, any adoption to it, but that journey of starting itself is what I think most founders enjoy. Like, founders don't do it for just the result, but the process of doing something itself is what I think is very exciting. So like I see those. So were you like you created a business out of it entirely, right? Like, so what was that like? Like, how did
Yes.
you take it from a prototype in a smaller app and then take it to a business that you created?
Right. And yeah, just to speak to what you were talking about, it is about the creative process, as a founder, and just having that fulfillment of doing that for yourself. I get a lot of enjoyment out of that, but then it's like at the end of the day, can I monetize it?
Mhm.
And so I really built that first app really for myself and released it to the store, put a price tag on it, and there was traction. And that really translated into the next phase of my businesses, which I really focused on e-commerce.
Mhm.
And this was early days of e-commerce, as I had done eBay auctions and stuff like that. But now brands were setting up their own websites. This was mostly on like WooCommerce, WordPress. So I got really good at that. I taught myself how to do that. I've always, appreciated the artistic side of the craft as well, and design. So I taught myself a little bit of Photoshop, and from there I got good enough to create brand websites. And so I went around to local businesses and just I got a little card. I registered my business, and any business I went into, I essentially gave them my card and say, hey, do you need a website? Hey, do you need a website? And just got traction that way. So it was really organic, and just really spreading my name out there. And this was exciting. I finally formed my first LLC here in the US. And that really energized me. And, landing your first client, landing the second client, landing the third client, it just builds that momentum. You just want to do it more and more and more, especially working a day job too, like I was working day job at this time. But, I always had the long-term goal of quitting that day job and making this a full-time thing. And it really started with that company, and building those e-commerce websites.
Makes sense. And looking at that time, I believe you were working in this in the early 2010s. That was a time where a lot of brands were coming online. Amazon has already proved the model works. Online shopping is great, and brands and like businesses were trying to at least have a website to show that hey, this is what our services or brand is all about. So must have been really exciting. You must have had also an opportunity to educate a lot of people, I'm guessing, right? Like many businesses must be like, why do you need a website, right? So that must have been a question at that time, that why does a person need a website itself? So were you dealing with those kind of things as well, that, or was it more like, yeah, everyone was already there that, yeah, I need a website, Greg, can you help us?
No, no, and you hit the nail on the head. A lot of people didn't understand at this point in time, like why they even needed a website. Why do I need a website? I have a business, I have a storefront. And so it was around that time where things started to shift and Google, just became explosive. And so that's where I would usually start is, think about, how you find out about something new. How are you finding these things? Are you finding them through TV? Are you finding them through friends and family? Those sorts of things, which people still were, but more people were using Google.
Hmm.
And so I use that analogy of, you know, if you expose yourself to the internet, you can have even more reach. And so I sort of set it up like that. If you want a brand presence, you want to expand your reach into online sales. This is the way to do it, and just sort of break it down like that. And, a lot of the businesses I started with were interested in that. I would say it wasn't much convincing. It was more like, I don't know how to do this, and you do know how to do this. So is there a way you can help me out? And then, yeah, there was the other side of it. Like I said, I was pretty like grassroots with it, just handing out business cards to local businesses, in which case I would have to explain that side of it. So it was definitely an interesting time, and a fun time too, to just explore that space and be able to help businesses who otherwise like just didn't have the knowledge or technical capabilities to do it themselves.
Yeah, I can imagine it must be, it uh, was a good time to be in the digital business, and like a great time. So what propelled you to, like, what was that turning point where you were like, I'm gonna quit my day job, and I'm just gonna do this full time?
Yeah, yeah. So it sort of came a little bit after, the technology piece was good and it was enough to make some like side income. And I really had, as most entrepreneurs do, a million ideas and a million different ways I wanted to take the business. How I ended up taking the business was, I began to take equity in e-commerce companies I was working with
Hmm.
instead of just taking the paycheck up front. Specifically, companies that I truly believed um, could become expansive and really grow in what I was seeing, which was like a e-commerce boom at the time, just from building these websites. And so that's what I started doing. I'd been working with a friend on some ideas around care packages, and one of these actually came to fruition. He brought the Amazon expertise to the table, and I brought the e-commerce expertise of just having a website. And so, we formed MyCollegeCrate, and that was the one where, I was no longer selling a service. I was now selling a physical good. I had to figure out logistics, learn FBA, learn Amazon, learn my COGS, profitability, all of those things. And we launched it to some success right off the bat, off of Amazon. And that's when I really thought to myself, oh my gosh, like this could be the one. This could be the one that I can finally quit my day job. Ultimately, it did end up being that one. And it took a lot of work, in the short term to make it become that. A lot of failure, um, and a lot of learning, but ultimately it did become that. And that was the turning point for me, where I saw a clear goal. And, I had a little whiteboard where here's my salary I make at my day job. Here's the salary I need to make in order to be able to quit that day job. And just watch that go up and down over a year or two until it was finally time.
There's a lot to learn over there, Greg. I think for people who are in the boat of trying to some new like everyone wants to quit a job, but they don't know the financial aspect of it, just like you're describing it.
Yeah.
But at what point can you quit? And I think there should be a financial model for it. For someone should put that
Yes.
Excel
Yes.
together. Maybe you can put that Excel together for others to just pay
Yeah.
use.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is. It's there is no real, like, I guess, right or wrong answer to approach it, and there is no model out there. I guess my model was just, here's the amount of money I make right now. I either have to get to that point or make a little bit of sacrifice, on my salary, and know that it's not just 1 month. Like, I need to support myself for multiple months. So that was my whiteboard calculation that worked for me, and in the end, it turned out okay.
100%. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I want to touch on something else you described, shared as well, right? Like your Amazon, the acceleration that Amazon as a marketplace created for your business. Like looking back at that time, I think a lot of sellers that started at that time are doing really well right now, who actually understood the ecosystems, how the advertising works, how listing works, how buy boxes work. So people who invested in understanding marketplaces during the 2013, 14, 15 phases are really doing well right now because, like there was the business e-commerce was growing in general, then COVID happened and whatnot. So did you scale from one from one category to multiple categories in your e-commerce journey?
Um, so yeah, my specific journey was pretty locked in.
Mhm.
I did try and expand into other categories. Um, so we were care package based.
Mhm.
So we mostly stood in the, like, gift baskets realm. And we were sort of sourcing some components from other suppliers overseas, and quickly, one of the things we tried to do is just sell those components directly. And one of the things we found was that some of these other categories are just extremely competitive. And what I mean by competitive, I mean paying for advertising and stuff like that. We were using Amazon's advertising and the care packages and found some good success there. But when we were switching categories, we found they were often, like, super competitive. And we found, like, the research tools out there for Amazon to identify, like, competitive sectors and non-competitive sectors. And eventually we decided, let's stay in our lane here and let's just own this lane as much as possible and just stay in that, stay focused on that. And that's where you just learn from your failures and you learn what you're good at and what isn't working. So it does take failure to learn those things. But once we figured that out, we had a clear path for growth. And I think just staying tracked on that one category was one of the things that we needed to learn to grow.
100%. I mean, I was reading about it recently. I mean, I'm scaling a company right now. So, like niching down is some advice that I think most books and most
Yes.
people would give you that, hey, you can't solve 10 things. So I can completely, like 100% agree with what you're saying, that you need to build expertise in that category and ecosystem, people identifying that category with your company and before expanding into hundreds of things. I think even the bigger companies face that problem, like when Cadillac started doing multiple, like sedan Cadillacs, mid-size Cadillac, and
Hmm.
an SUV Cadillac. What is a Cadillac anymore, right? So I
Right.
think that really resonates. That you got to stick to a category, build such a good expertise, business market in it that people then you can expand, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the perfect way of putting it, is just niching down, and sort of just getting one thing completely right, or as much right as you can before you go on to that next thing. So that was a valuable lesson I think I learned in my entrepreneurial journey.
So, I mean, not just entrepreneurial. I think you were doing a lot of charity work during using this particular business as well, right? So, talk about that aspect of
Yeah.
which you still run, which I think I'm very curious and like want to learn more about of how it what problem you're solving for the community.
Yeah. I mean, I've always felt that, like, you can use your business to be a driver of good in the world, and that was my mission. That was how I wanted to build my businesses. And so, every time I build a business, obviously there's financial goals, there's company goals, all of those business related goals, but like, what good can you do with the business too? And I really learned that through the CareCrate Co. and developing the CareCrate Co. out because, we had these gift boxes and a lot of them had food components in it. And a lot of times, the food might get damaged on arrival, might get damaged on returns processing, or if we sent this out, it was open and then sent back to us for whatever reason, like we can't use that food anymore. But at the end of the day, there's people starving here in the local community in the greater Cleveland, Ohio region. And I knew because I would drive by people every single day that needed food. So what I started doing is just taking those food components that I knew were still good, and just started handing them out as I was driving. So that's how it really started, and that was the core of creating a social mission behind the business. And when I started doing that, I started growing too, to the point where I had so many returns I can't even fit them in my car, or so much bad, like unusable food. I would say unsellable food. This was usable food, but I couldn't sell it in the condition it was in. And so, I partner with the Greater Cleveland Food Bank here in Ohio, or in Cleveland. And, I was able to just take pallets of my food there and they were able to distribute it. And I started to notice, at this time, I started to gain employees, like we had probably 10 employees. And I said, hey, would you guys just want to go to the Greater Cleveland Food Bank? They need help packing boxes. That's what we do. So I figured it would be perfect. And I got buy-in from like the entire warehouse. So like, yeah, we would love to do this with you. And so we went there and, we did like a 2 or 3 hour shift the first time. And the employees who worked at the food bank were like, wow, you guys are really good at this. What do you guys do? And we're like, well, we pack food boxes all day. So it was sort of the perfect match. Um, and yeah, it not only gives the business a greater purpose, but also the employees became invested in it. And I would see that out on the warehouse floor. I would see them, putting more care into the boxes, handling things differently, asking me things like, "Hey, I know this family is in need. Would you mind if I took this box to them?" And we extended our hands, even through COVID. We knew people were suffering, so we had like a no questions asked policy. If somebody needed something, we will ship it to you completely free. Just take it and use it because everyone's going through a tough time right now. So people in the organization got really behind that message, and people wanted to work with us too because of that message. So it not only had the social benefits but also business benefits attached to it too. So I make sure to incorporate some type of social mission to all of my companies because I do think it's an important part of business that sometimes gets overlooked.
Yeah, I totally agree. There has to be a bigger purpose for everyone else to kind of tie themselves to versus just the economics of a business. So
Yeah.
I totally agree, and I'm like listening through like how you're helping with food. Food is such a necessity. So helping somebody with food is I feel is the even if it's for animal shelters or for regular shelters or people, I think it's a great thing that somebody can do for somebody else because food is the necessity. It's clothes,
Mhm.
electronics, donating all those things. Toys are not necessities in that manner. So like listening through it, I mean, I'm super inspired. Like I didn't know that. I would want to do something like that in future, where if I can also create like a direct impact and provide some services in the local community. So, do you? I'm guessing you continue to do it like through the business, or like how is it going now?
Yeah, yeah. So we continue to do that. Unusable or unsellable food continues to get donated. We have ongoing sort of volunteering efforts. We've also partnered with a couple other just local organizations that um, have heard about what we were doing, substance abuse organizations, volunteering with them. There's one called Walls of Love here in Cleveland, where essentially they They attach necessities onto local walls of businesses that opt into this in the local community. So it's sort of anonymized. You can go up and get a toothbrush, deodorant, like whatever you need,
Very nice.
necessities. So we stay involved in the community in that way. And yeah, it just fosters good relationships between the workers, and it's just a good way to give back locally and have some local impact.
Yeah, 100%. Like, especially to attract talent as well, as you said, people who would want to work even in temp roles and whatnot.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Awesome. So for going forward, like 2020, COVID time, think times were changing, and I think that is the time where, if I remember correctly, you switched lanes and you went into this, the 3PL industry. So do you want to touch on that, of what that time was like?
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll back up just a tiny bit,
Sure, sure.
because one thing I didn't tell you about the care crate business is the logistics of it is a true pain in the ass. So we all have parts of our businesses that are a pain in the ass, and you know that for me was the logistics. Um, because if you think about it, our care packages have 50 to 60 items in them. All are expirable. So we have 50 or 60 touches, and if you know anything about picking and packing, every touch costs money. The more touches you have, the more money it costs. So there was many days on in the warehouse where me and one of my best friends, name's Adam Borza, we would go in and try and get these touches down to as little as possible, um, and try and get as efficient and dialed in as possible in the pick, pack, ship process. And the years 2017, 2018, right before the pandemic, I'm searching for 3PLs. Nobody is able to get this right or get this at the price point that I need it. And so I decided to start Shipping Pilot, because I just realized there are 3PLs out there, but none of them e-commerce based or to the point to have enough customization to handle special businesses like the one I was developing. And, through the learning of the logistics of the CareCrate Co. and getting efficiencies, I'm like, this is a business in itself. So, as you're developing businesses, you're like, oh my gosh, like I just developed a business in a business. So I broke that out into a separate logistics business focused on e-commerce logistics. This is right before 2020. I'm talking 2019, when I formed the LLC. And so I had all these connections just developing the CareCrate Co brand. And I just started reaching out to them. Hey, I'm starting a logistics company and we're focused on e-commerce. We know how to do FBA, which was, just new and budding at the time. We know how to do Amazon, Walmart, WooCommerce, all the technical integration. I relied on my computer science background. And we got a lot of buy-in because everyone didn't, at that point in time, most people you have to get a warehouse yourself, which means you're locked in for a couple of years to a contract. You have to learn logistics. You have to hire workers. You need equipment. That's the route most businesses were going. And then, the pandemic happened. Warehouses, shut down, retail stores shut down. And it's like, okay, you either pivot to e-commerce or, you just try and survive the times. And unfortunately, many businesses couldn't survive those times. And the ones who did survive the times likely had an e-commerce presence. And by having that e-commerce presence, they quickly learned, as a business owner, what I was referring to earlier as a pain in the ass is the logistics, because like you just aren't trained on that. You're trained on building a brand, being a founder. And that's why 3PLs make so much sense, because you don't have to be an expert in a fulfillment sense. And so that's, I became that expert and developed Shipping Pilot. We understood all the requirements of e-commerce, how to hook into all the platforms, deliver customer service at a level that was high touch, high frequency to make sure these brands were growing. Because at the end of the day, one of the things I wanted to accomplish with Shipping Pilot, if my clients grew, I grew. And I knew that. And so I would do everything I could to make these clients grow, whether it's, here's how you can go omni-channel. Here's how you can get into FBA. Here's some things that I see other brands are doing. And that was really pivotal for Shipping Pilot. That 2020 COVID, that huge motion from retail to e-commerce. And then from e-commerce to, oh crap, I have to figure out my logistics. I need to find an e-commerce 3PL. And that's really where Shipping Pilot found a lot of success.
Makes sense. So it's, I mean, because you were starting with gifting packages, you were starting with the ugly side of the packing, right? So
Yes. Yeah.
because you mastered that,
Yeah.
I think I could really see that how, like, I mean, I've like how Shipping Pilot must be able to solve so many fulfillment challenges and logistics challenges for brands because you started from the very complex side of it, and now everything else is much, much easier. And coming from your background, where half of the time I think 3PL operators are highly intimidated by the technology challenges of it, how would the integrations
Yes.
work, what the WMS would look like, and having worked in the e-commerce space, understanding brands, what are they trying to do. So that all that must have been, I guess, in a way, very, very helpful to kind of scale Shipping Pilot during that time.
Yeah, yeah, it was, having that background, the technical capabilities. Yeah, I mean, it's not like it is today where it was one button clicks. I mean, I'm sure you remember this, Shiv,
Mm.
just coming from a technical background too, but like having API keys and to that extent, like it still is that way with some platforms. But having that expertise, yeah, really, really helped grow Shipping Pilot. And, even today, I work for fulfill.com, and now brands know. They know I have to have a 3PL. They know expectations of logistics providers, and also know like I don't want to do it myself either. And that's why fulfill.com exists, is to match those brands based on requirements, whether it's an expansion to a new region, whether it's, I need bi-coastal shipping, I need to go to UK, Canada, EU, wherever. And we sort of do that scoping, do those requirements gathering all up front, and then go in our proprietary network of like 800 vetted 3PLs who already have, that presence that Shipping Pilot had in the early days of, you know, post COVID, of that e-commerce presence. We understand how to do e-commerce. We understand how to grow your CPG brands. We understand the high touches you need, or the custom kitting challenges you might face, or the co-packing that you might need as a CPG brand. So it's a different landscape now, and now it's almost to the point where it's a very, I'd not say it's oversaturated, but it's very saturated now with all different types of 3PLs and specialty 3PLs. And that's where fulfill.com can really come in and help brands, so they don't have to do all the research, they don't have to guess, they don't have to hop 3PLs, every 3 months, which was very common at that time in 2020, of like, if you miss the mark, you're changing 3PLs every couple months. So it's a different landscape now than it was post COVID. And now I would say like a lot of 3PLs have that same, that post-COVID understanding of e-commerce and how to just do it all for an e-commerce brand now. They're built around that, just like Shipping Pilot was.
100%. I mean, there's a lot larger need to differentiate in the 3PL industry than just providing pick and pack and like dropping to UPS. So 100% agree. So I mean, I think we've touched on fulfillment.com. I wanted to touch on also the challenges, right? Like of working with like different multiple brands as a 3PL, and also as fulfillment.com today. Like, where do you see brands struggle the most in terms of their logistical challenges? I from having worked in the industry, I know there's a need for having specialized services. Every brand is different, but I want to hear from your perspective, like where do you see like what is the most important thing that brands care about that 3PLs can serve?
Yeah. So, I was actually starting to write like a blog post on this, because I see this common mistake like all the time with brands, and it's not a mistake for every brand, and I totally get it as a brand owner. Um, but like one of the things that brand owners always want to start off with is, I need a 3PL that's close to me. Um, and while it makes complete sense that you would want a 3PL close to you to be able to like have some oversight, be able to do some quality control, stuff like that. Um, it's really more about what is a 3PL is the best fit for you and your business and not proximity to you.
Mhm.
And I'll highlight this with an example. Let's say you live in New York City or LA, and you say, I want to be close to my fulfillment center. I'm doing 200 orders a month, for example. That's great, and you'll get the oversight, and you can go in and check on them and train them and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, New York City becomes a zone 8 shipping zone for you. And if half of your 200 orders per month are going to New York City, those dollars add up very quickly, and it's not going to help you scale very well. And it will become actually a burden to growth. Whereas, finding a 3PL that fits your needs, and going like regardless where it is, every single 3PL is always happy to have their clients fly out to them. Even I would recommend video tour. Get your FaceTime out, go see that 3PL. But having one that fits your needs and actually fits your needs on a financial, aspect, to a client relational aspects, customer service, customer experience, all of those check boxes is far more important than proximity. I would say for 80% of e-commerce brands, 80%. The other 20%, maybe you do have that high touch, high QA needs, some complex system that really does require you to be close or on site. I would say maybe that's 10 to 20%, maybe if that, but 80% of e-commerce brands should really try to find fit over locality. And it will benefit the brand long term and help you grow and scale even more.
100%. And I mean, I think the work that you guys are doing at fulfill.com is really important to be able to execute that, because you're consolidating 3PL and what they work on, what they provide as a business, what softwares they use, what kind of capacity can they handle, what integrations they have at one place. So, a brand can come to fulfillment.com and then basically create their own 3PL strategy, where it could be that, all right, based on my data, I need to be in New York, find me the best 3PL in New York. And I'm also growing in West Coast, so find me the best in that area. So if I start growing in another area, find me another partner. And 3PL, fulfillment.com as the platform has all the information on different partners. So if they can customize, you guys can customize essentially. Okay, this is the WMS they need. This is the kind of packing requirements that they have. These are the carriers that they're using. What three can provide and still have a seamless experience. And that even makes more sense when expanding internationally. Where, so I mean, I really see a lot of value that fulfillment.com brings to the business, because otherwise as you were saying, it takes a lot of time from a brand to kind of find these partners, vet them, know if they're going to come through on whatever they're saying, whereas the brand has limited resources at that time, which they have to invest in product development, customer success, sales and marketing, and logistics being someone once told me, nobody gets into the e-commerce business to get into the logistics business, but ultimately they find
Right,
they find
right.
themselves in a
Yeah,
logistics
yeah,
business.
yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so true. And yeah, you're exactly right, Shiv. And like at fulfill.com, so like we essentially become handholders for you through the process. We have all the logistics expertise. We know the ins and outs. We have plenty of case studies up on the website at fulfill.com of, we save customer X over $1, per pick pack ship, or $5 sometimes in shipping costs, just by coming to us. And we're cutting down your search cycles too, to find the right 3PL, especially for enterprise brands, can become months long or take an entire quarter. If you come to us, we have proven strategies. We know all the 3PLs on our networks. We take your scope. We'll put it together in a synopsis document, compare side by side pricing, apples to apples, as 3PL pricing can vary wildly across the industry. And we essentially become advisors to the brand on the logistical strategy. And the best part is it's all free of costs. And people are like, how is this free of cost? And it's because, the 3PLs are paying for these leads and to get introductions to the brands. And so we just act as, an advisor and a matchmaker between the 3PLs and the brands to help them find a good fit on both ends. To your point earlier, Shiv, there's specialty 3PLs, there's cold chain 3PLs out there. And if we get a brand that needs to be cold chain, we're only going to look in our network at cold chain and make sure we understand the requirements. So yeah, at the end of the day, we like to be logistical advisors and partners to find a good fit and a home where you're not looking every 3 months for a new 3PL provider.
Yeah, 100%. And logistics is very important to a business to succeed as well, because as a brand, you can make promises, but logistics is where you actually fulfill them. So if you're not able to
Yes.
so I feel the role of logistics and providers like you are even more important, because otherwise you can't scale. You can probably work out of your garage or a smaller warehouse, but you can't scale if you want to go global or even pan America.
Yeah, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's correct. You need a full logistics strategy in order to be able to scale and grow in those ways. And that's where we help those enterprise brands come up with their strategy and, make sure they find the right partner.
Yeah, 100%. So in this search, like one thing I want to kind of ask you is, are you seeing an influx of a lot of 3PLs that are providing return services as well? Where do you see the role of providing return services for 3PL, I guess is my question.
Yeah, this is one that I think still needs to get solved. And yes, your 3PL provider will do your returns. Or every 3PL provider that you interact with should be able to handle returns at some capacity. But to me, returns processing is a whole different animal. And it always was a whole different animal, even when I was running Shipping Pilot. And, I quickly learned that like it needs a whole separate department in a 3PL to do it right. And to answer your question, Shiv, like, yeah, more 3PLs are popping up. Reverse logistics is becoming a key word because I think it just needs to still get solved at a very high level. Not only like the returns processing, but what happens after the return? What happens, in my days at Shipping Pilot doing returns, working with clothing companies, was always interesting because sometimes you get your return in the same plastic bag that it was sent in. Other times you get it back with cat and dog hair and they want a full refund. And obviously, like there's a whole QA process and all of that. And then it's like, what do you do with the goods after that? And, luckily, again, just, the extension of having that social mission, we were able to take clothes like that and donate them to like women's shelters and homeless shelters and stuff like that. So, it's good to find a 3PL that has their reverse logistics solution in place. And I think brand owners should ask those questions when searching for a 3PL. What is your reverse logistics strategy? How does it work? Do you have a dashboard? What are your returns KPIs? Returns processing KPIs. Is it 3 days? Is it a week? What does that look like? So it's important to figure out. I still think we're in our infancy of reverse logistics, but there's great platforms up and coming, just like your platform, Shiv, which I think is just going to be huge, especially for brand owners looking to monetize their inventory.
Yeah, I mean, I I totally agree. There's like to your earlier point with respect to the lack of I think there are less 3PLs that are in that market. What I've also seen is lately popping up 3PLs that are just return focused. You know, they are called as RMAs, return management 3PLs. That's all they do. So brands can also look at it this way that sure, I mean, I'm very happy with the 3PL that is taking care of my forward, but I need to go to a specialized, RMA, just like we go to the specialized, 3PL for our fulfillment, because that way you get your inventory. If you're a clothing brand, you go to a place that has a washing machine, a dry cleaning, and a place to repackage, and that's the kind of workflow that they're running through. If you're electronics, then you have, technicians refurbishing, taping, and going. And that's, I feel like that itself is a 3PL industry that needs to. If I would have been in the 3PL industry right now instead of last year, I would have actually tried to do that, because brands don't know much what they should do with the returns. They come up with ad hoc processes. All right, let's donate it, let's do it, instead of, okay, this is what I'm going to resell, this is what I'm going to resell, this is what I'm going to donate. And given that now 15-20% of the things come back, it's just, if you just not take value out of it, that you're losing 20% of your revenue as doing business.
Yeah, yeah. It is pretty crazy, just the amount of returns that have popped up. And I mean, especially in certain verticals, obviously the clothing has to be by far and away the biggest, and the toughest. So, I think it's good. Not only, like you said, like there's dedicated 3PLs to these now. It's becoming more and more common, reverse logistics. I mean, we've seen Amazon's, I think it's a genius strategy of returning to Kohl's and places like that, and then they offer coupons, and it's like, oh, buy something here now, you're already at the store. So, you know, looking at those strategies and how it's evolving, it's super cool to watch. I love watching it. I'm a logistics nerd, and this is like an emerging industry that I love to watch to see where it's going. It's super interesting to me.
Yeah, to me as well. Like 100%, I've been a victim of that call, return the coupon, and then buy something else a lot of times. So
Yes.
I think it's
Yeah,
working
they
for
get
Cole.
me every time. Every time. I mean, I have kids too, so it's just like good luck if I'm in there with them. They're gonna try and get something.
Yeah,
So,
and they make it at the back of the store so that you have to walk through the store. It's not like,
oh yes, yes, yeah, yeah. Walk through all the little stuff that you can easily grab and take up to the counter on the way out.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I think brands, the retailers, 3PLs, everyone, I think is doing something or the other, experimentation and actually building products in the reverse logistics side, because now it is a more common problem where goods are going to be returned. People are expecting to be able to return things, and people who don't know much about the shipping cost side of the things, they don't realize what it takes to send a product, then return back, and then refurbish it, put it back into the 3PL, pick and pack it. By that time, your cost is gone, everything is gone. So huge opportunity there to kind of optimize at all levels, from returning to reselling, picking, packing.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And I just think, just to speak to the points earlier, just making sure if you're a brand to have a good reverse logistics strategy. And if you're a brand using a 3PL, making sure that their reverse logistics strategy aligns with yours is critical, because that is dollars you are losing if you don't have it right.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah. Hopefully, like there would be more RMAs popping up into the fulfillment network, because I think that it's more and more brands would hopefully use those services in the future.
Yeah, yeah. We do have specialized reverse logistics on our network at fulfill.com. So, and to your point, Shiv, and what we were talking about earlier, just with clothing brands. I mean, we have so on our network we have clothing specific 3PLs who do the fulfillment, and then reverse logistics that's a separate supplier on the back end. And they know exactly what they're doing. Here's the QA process. This is return to inventory. This is donate. This needs to be washed, cleaned, retagged, rebagged, and resold. We have those on our network. So it is becoming more and more popular. And I think we're going to see this grow over the next couple of years. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, 100%. It's gonna grow at a higher pace than the forward one, for sure. But yeah, super exciting to kind of be in this industry right now, especially with respect to also what's happening to the logistics side of thing. I know you post a lot of content about, the shipping rates that are increasing, UPS, FedEx, what's happening there. Do you want to share a little bit about that? Just like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's I think it's frustrating to almost everybody what's going on with national carriers right now. with USPS raising rates and slowing down mail. And then you have, FedEx, UPS, and DHL. They all have GRIs every year. Last year it was like 7 to 8%. So that's like baseline cost. If you didn't raise your shipping rates last year, you just lost 7 to 8% right off the bat. And a lot of things that people, don't know if you're a brand, and even some 3PLs are like those accessorial charges are just like tough. So like what I'm talking about is there's things called a DAS and an EDAS, which is a delivery area surcharge and an extended delivery area surcharge. These things apply to, when you print that label, it says $7, but when it gets to the location that is in the mountains or on an island or wherever it is, that's very hard to get to. Boom, you have another $20 and you just wiped away all your profits on that. So that's something to pay attention to, and something I've been watching very closely and posting a lot about on LinkedIn. And it's interesting because it is creating opportunity, just as everything does. When something goes up, something's coming down. So, and the opportunity right now is what I like to call super regional carriers and regional carriers. So like regional carriers been around for a long time. A regional carrier is something that, for instance, if you're up in the northeastern parts of the states, they only service the northeastern parts of the states, and they can deliver your small parcel at a rate that's cheaper than national carriers. And so, for many years, it was very fragmented. You would have to work with regional carriers. If you were a 3PL or a brand, you'd have to have one East Coast, West Coast, Northwest, Southeast, Northeast, and you'd have to work with many regionals. And it became, you had to have a whole person, a whole FTE dedicated to managing this. What's happening now is there's things that I'm just going to refer to as super regionals, but essentially, they started off as a regional carrier, but now they service the entire United States or entire North America. And it's interesting because they see what's going on with FedEx, USPS, and UPS, the GRIs, the accessorials, all other types of surcharges, and they say, guess what? Our services do not have those. We're getting rid of those. We have a standard, 3 to 5 day, and it costs this amount per zone. And then we have a 2 to 3 day express, and it costs this much per zone. There's no extra fees, extra charges, DAS. And then there's the fuel. So it becomes a very simple mathematical equation that brands can understand and 3PLs understand, whereas some of the national carriers have gone to a very confusing pricing model, which I think is intentional, to just squeeze every last dollar out of the networks. And so that's what I'm seeing a lot of switching from the national carriers to these regionals, super regionals. And then, I think the biggest surprise, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise, is Amazon Shipping is scheduled to be the #1 carrier in the United States by 2028, which is just, when you think about it, makes a ton of sense. They have logistics centers and processing centers all over the place. So, those are the things I'm keeping my eye on right now, and I'm posting a lot about, is what's going on in the carrier world, because it's changing rapidly and new players are emerging. And if you're a brand or if you're a 3PL, you'll want to pay attention to this, because it's dollars of savings, potentially, depending on what your strategy is.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like carrier fees are like about 7 to 8% of the cost of providing, cost to deliver a good, basically from production to delivering. So it's definitely an area which any brand and 3PL cannot just ignore. I resonate with the hidden cost aspect where, like, you'll never know, right? And they don't even come at the
Yeah,
time of
yeah,
your payment, they come later down. So, it becomes
yes.
like an additional task to do dispute management, for which you have to hire another person. I'm really excited to see like some tools that are coming in that area that do, dispute management themselves, because as a team, you don't have time to deal and, like haggle with somebody for $20, but they add up. When you have thousands of $20, then it's a lot of money to discuss with them. And I think carriers, I don't know, hidden and intentional, non-intentional. I've worked at FedEx. I remember I used to work on this project where every year in January we used to refresh prices, and it was all based on a data model. It was coming from what's increasing with petrol, what's increasing with labor costs, so it was a highly educated and like intelligent model to come up with that pricing. But then again, now the updates are happening more than once in a year. So there's something happening there as well where why do you feel the need to, in the middle of year, feel like, oh, my profitability is not where it needs to be, right? So I don't know. Carriers are definitely in the space where they're at the point where let's get the most out of it. And similarly, Amazon is doing as well with the sellers. I
Yes.
feel like they're in that stage of their growth where they don't care about the demand side of the business that much.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I just think it's so hard as a business. Like you brought up, Amazon selling fees is the perfect one because, it's the same as the carriers. It's new fees, raise prices. Um, and as a business, whether you're a 3PL, a brand, whatever, you just have to keep your ear to the ground on it. That's why I'm posting a lot about it on LinkedIn, trying to get the news out as quickly as possible to make brands aware, to make sure they can have the strategies in place to pivot or make the adjustments they need. And you brought up a good point, Shiv. There's a lot of new tools that can automate a lot of this for you. One of the biggest things that I learned at the 3PL was like something called carrier reconciliation, where essentially you look at the cost that you expected to pay, and then you look at the bill, and then any bill after that was attached to a certain shipment, like you said, and we'd have to reconcile the cost so we would know to bill back customers. Now there's tons of great tools, and at fulfill.com, that's another part of what we do is we have insights into all of those tools where if you have a logistical problem, outside of just a 3PL, maybe you are a 3PL and you need to know how to do carrier reconciliation. You want better rates. I need a better way to bill back my customers or just to reconcile any of the billing we're doing. There's tons of great tools out there. And, we formed a pretty strong vendor partnership network now to be able to provide these tools, with discounts to the people that need them. So yeah, it's definitely something I'm going to be watching as well, in reverse logistics, how the carrier landscape is changing. All of these things have big changes in the next few years. That will be fun to watch.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Um, One last question from me. In the middle of doing all these things that you've been doing for the last, I think, 2 decades, like how do you find time to climb Everest Base Camp and, you know, like where do you
Yeah,
find the energy and
yeah,
the zeal to, like get yourself all across Asia and do all that? I'd love to know.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, Everest was just like a bucket list thing that I had. There was the book Into Thin Air by Jan Krakauer, which is like my all-time favorite book, and I would always go back to it. One of those reads that I can never get enough of. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. And so yeah, I decided to go up to Everest Base Camp, and I like having personal challenges, business challenges, like all of those things, anything that the net result is good in my life. And that was one of those things that I just wanted to do. And I'm so glad I did it because Nepal is amazing. I mean, don't get me wrong, the trek was very difficult. I had to train for many, many months. But Nepal was amazing. Kathmandu, the mountain, everything was just amazing. And I think it's important as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, to make that time for yourself to go off and like recharge and just like step away from everything. Like I did not have cell phone access, barely access to running water, electricity. Um, and it was a good reset, and came back like refreshed. And I think you can get lost in the grind. I've been there so many times. You get lost in the grind. You want to build, 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 go, go, go. But I do think it's important sometimes to slow down. And so, that was one of my slow down moments. And I was very happy to do it. And I met some great people, some lifelong friends. And yeah, we're gonna be going to Patagonia next year. So Shiv, you might have to come along with me if you're free.
Sure. I mean, I can give it a try. I mean, and I totally resonate with having some, it's getting lost in the grind, and it also creates stress, right? And these things are really good way to kind
Yes.
of, de-stress. I mean, not just on a vacation basis, but on a daily basis as well, finding that time, 30, 40, 45 minutes, whatever you have daily, to just make this work stop in your head and do something which, challenges you and rewards you in that way. So, I mean, I can imagine, like, were you on a diet or were you doing something during that time with respect to when you were training? Was it 3 month, 4 month? Because base camp is no joke. Like, it seems, I don't know if people understand the gravity of being on Everest Base Camp, but it's not like an easy task to be up there.
No. Yeah, yeah. There's less than 50% sea level oxygen,
Exactly.
up at Everest Base Camp. So many of the people I was with, you get like disoriented, lots of fatigue, lots of headaches. I had just a pounding headache the whole time up there. So yeah, it was challenging. I mean, I started probably even the year before, just like riding a Peloton and doing some weightlifting and stuff. But like my end goal was to get my cardio up, just because I knew like my breath work really needed work. And so that sort of came all the way up until the fall here in Cleveland, and really I started rucking. And so what rucking is, if people aren't aware, is basically you wear a weighted vest and you just go out into the wilderness and hike. And so I'm very blessed to be in Cleveland, Ohio, where we have the metro parks. And there's this place called Rocky River Reservation that has 100 feet in elevation gain, on steps. And so I would do 10 times up and down that, because the average amount of elevation gain per day that we gained in Nepal was 1,000 feet. And so I did that with a weighted vest, and I would do that for 3 or 4 hours every weekend. Um, and then when I couldn't get out, I would just go up and down the steps in my house.
Wow.
And then like really, really really hit the Peloton and ride hard just to work on my breath work a lot. And yeah, that was the training I did. I did. I also went with a buddy who went to Nepal with me. We went to Colorado. We did
Mm.
a 14er there. So yeah, that was sort of how we prepared. But you're right, Everest is no joke, and I would not recommend going there without any training, because it is that dangerous.
Yeah, 100%. You need to train your way there. You can't just be like, hey, I'm going to do Everest Base Camp today.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, this has been a pleasure, Greg. I really appreciate your time. Any last words from you? Anything that you'd like to share more?
No, just if this podcast interested you, you can follow me, Greg Airel, Airel, on LinkedIn or Twitter. And you can always reach out to me, greg@fulfill.com, if you have any logistics needs. I'm always happy to help a brand or a 3PL with their growth strategies. Feel free to reach out to me. And Shiv, thanks for having me on. We talk all the time. It's good to talk to you in this fashion as well. And yeah, we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot for your time, Greg. Yeah, highly recommend Greg for any sort of services. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time, Greg.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya. Bye.